The scream echoed through the frozen mountains of the Santa Catarina, like a blade tearing through the silence of dawn. I stood at the edge of the precipice, my heart pounding against my ribs as I looked at what was left of Caio Silveira, or, rather, what the dragon had left of him. His olive-green uniform was in smoking tatters, stained a red so dark it looked black in the dim moonlight. Caio's eyes, which just minutes ago had been shining with anticipation before the final test, now stared at the starry sky with the empty expression of someone whose soul had been ripped from their body. The black dragon of the caves remained, over the corpse, its scales glistening like wet obsidian, its snout still dripping warm blood that melted the snow around it. "Another failure," muttered Commander Gabriel Vargas beside me, his voice as sharp as the icy wind that blew down from the araucaria trees. The scars on his face seemed deeper in the shadows, especially the large burn that disfigured his left side. He scribbled something in the small notebook he always carried, without even looking down. "Isadora Mendes, you're next." My name sounded like a death sentence. My hands shook so much that I had to grab the necklace hidden under my military jacket, the only memory I had of my dead father. The strange stone pulsed against my fingers, hot as embers, and for an absurd moment, I swore I heard an ancient whisper echoing in my mind. "Don't be afraid, little one. We're here." The voice wasn't mine. Leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love hearing where all these brave people who love intense stories are from. And when you finished listening to this disturbing story, I want you to give it a rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me what you liked best. Let's start this journey together. My name is Isadora Mendes. I'm 18 years old, and I've always known that I wasn't born to be a warrior. At 5'4", and with a body that looks more like a dry tree branch, I was always the last to be chosen for anything that required physical strength. On my family's farm, amid the frozen fields of San Joaquim, I was known as the girl with the wounded animals, always finding birds with broken wings or foals abandoned by their mothers. I never imagined that this strange affinity for wounded creatures was the reason why men in uniform showed up at our door one winter morning, demanding that I accompany them to a place they refused to name. "The girl has potential," said the tallest officer, watching me as if I were an exotic animal. The tests detected interesting anomalies. My mother cried so hard I thought she would melt the frost on the window panes. She hugged me, tightly, whispering in my ear, "Remember what I always told you about your father, Isa. He was special, and so are you." It wasn't until the military jeep disappeared around the winding curves of the mountains that I realized she had never told me exactly how my father was special, or how he had died. The Southwinds Military Academy stood like a scar of concrete and steel in the middle of the pristine landscape of the Santa Catarina Mountains. Built on the site of a century-old cattle ranch, the complex took advantage of the natural caves that spread through the mountains like stone veins. Constant fog enveloped the buildings, creating a ghostly atmosphere that made my skin crawl. "Welcome to hell, rookie," said a hoarse voice behind me. I turned and came face to face with a boy of perhaps 16, with muscular arms covered in small scars and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Marcus Teodoro, I later found out. 3 years at the academy, 2 failed attempts to bond with dragons, and a reputation for being the cruelest to newbies. "Here you'll find out if you're strong enough to deserve a dragon," he continued, circling me like a predator, "or if you'll become food for them, like most." Food? The word came out weaker than I wanted it to. Marcus laughed, a sound that echoed through the empty hallways. "You don't know anything, do you? Dragons aren't pets, little girl. They're ancient predators who tolerate humans for convenience. And if you don't prove you deserve their respect?" He made an eloquent gesture with his finger across his throat. That first night, lying in the cold bunk bed in the girls' dormitory, I lay awake listening to the whispers of the other cadets. Stories about girls who had disappeared during the tests, about body parts found in the lower caves, about dragons that developed a taste for human flesh and had to be eliminated. "Commander Elena lasted 3 days hanging from the red dragon's claw before she died," whispered Bruna, a girl with fiery red hair who had been at the academy for 2 years. They say she begged so much that even the dragons took pity on her. That's a lie, retorted Camilla, an older girl with an ugly scar on her right arm. Dragons don't feel pity. Elena died because she didn't have what it takes. It's that simple. I pressed the necklace against my chest, feeling the stone pulse with that strange heat. Again, that voice whispered in my mind, soft as a summer breeze. Don't believe everything you hear, little one. The truth is hidden deep within. The next morning, I was introduced to Commander Gabriel Vargas for the first time. He stood in the center of the main courtyard, his impeccable black uniform contrasting with the scars that mapped his exposed skin. The burn that covered the left side of his face was even more impressive up close, an irregular mark that stretched from his temple to his chin, as if something had tried to tear him from the living world. Cadets, his voice echoed across the courtyard like distant thunder. I present to you our newest addition, Isadora Mendes, from Saint Joachim. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me, and I couldn't decide if there was more curiosity or pity in those gazes. Some cadets were clearly older, with defined muscles and scars that told stories of battles they had survived. Others looked as young as I did, but they carried a hardness in their eyes that I didn't possess. As you all know, the commander continued, forming bonds with dragons is not a right. It is a privilege earned through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Some of you have what it takes. His gaze swept across the group, lingering on a few specific faces. Others will serve as a lesson to those who do. A chill ran down my spine. There was something about the way he spoke of sacrifice that made me suspect he wasn't being metaphorical. The tests begin tomorrow at dawn, he announced. Isadora, you have today to adjust. I suggest you use that time wisely. When the group dispersed, I noticed that Commander Vargas remained watching me for a few seconds longer. His dark gray eyes seemed to search my soul, looking for something specific. Finally, he nodded to himself and walked away, but not before I heard him mutter something that froze my blood, just like your father. How did he know my father? The rest of the day passed in a blur of briefings and demonstrations. I learned that the academy operated with a strict hierarchy based on proximity to the dragons. Cadets who had formed complete bonds occupied the upper dormitories and enjoyed special privileges. Those who were still trying lived on the middle floors. And newbies like me stayed in the basement, near the kitchens and latrines. But what impressed me most were the caves. The academy had been built taking advantage of a natural cave complex that stretched for miles under the mountains. The deepest passages were the exclusive territory of the dragons, areas where no humans were allowed without express permission. The intermediate chambers served as training areas, with ceilings high enough for flying creatures and walls reinforced to withstand fire. Never enter the caves alone, warned Sophia, a third-year cadet with braided black hair and a scar that ran from her ear to her collarbone. The dragons may seem tame during exercises, but down there they follow different rules. Older rules. What kind of rules? I asked. Sophia hesitated, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. There are dragons on this mountain that have never been bonded. Wild dragons, older than the academy itself. Some say they are the true masters of this place, and we are just tolerated visitors. That night, after all the other cadets had fallen asleep, I got up quietly and walked over to the dorm window. Outside, snow was falling in thick flakes, covering the landscape in a white blanket that reflected the starlight. The mountains rose around the academy like silent guardians, their hidden caves looking like dark mouths waiting to devour the unwary. That's when I saw her. A huge shadow crossed the starry sky, its wings seeming to tear through the night itself. For a moment, the creature hovered over the academy complex, and I could make out its shape. A dragon larger than anything I had ever imagined, with scales that glistened like liquid gold in the moonlight. My heart raced, and without being able to control it, my mind opened up to that ancient and powerful presence. The connection was instant and overwhelming. Daughter of ancient blood. The voice echoed in my head like the roar of a distant waterfall. You have finally arrived. We have waited a long time for you. Blood trickled from my nose in 2 warm streams. The pain was intense, as if someone were sticking needles into my brain. But I couldn't break the connection. It was addictive, that feeling of touching such a vast and ancient mind. Who are you? I thought back, barely able to form coherent words through the pain. I am Storm of the Plateau, last of the golden dragons, guardian of the secrets your father died to protect. And you, little Isadora, are the key to a future you do not yet understand. Before I could ask any more questions, the connection was abruptly severed. The golden dragon disappeared into the low clouds, leaving me reeling with a throbbing head and the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. I wiped my nose with the sleeve of my nightgown and went back to bed, but sleep would not come. The dragon's words echoed in my mind. Secrets your father died to protect. My father hadn't died in a work accident, as my mother had always said. There was more to the story. Something involving dragons, secrets, and a military academy hidden in the mountains of Santa Catarina. When dawn broke, painting the sky pink and gold, I knew that my life had changed forever the night before. I wasn't just another cadet trying to survive brutal training. I was part of something bigger, something dangerous that had started with my father and now rested on my fragile shoulders. The academy bell rang 6 times, calling everyone to breakfast. I got out of bed, put on my military uniform with hands that were still shaking slightly, and headed for another day at an institution that held deadly secrets. I didn't know it yet, but in a few hours I would be face to face with my first dragon, and I would discover that some connections are too strong to be broken, even when they threaten to destroy us. The academy cafeteria was buzzing with whispered conversations as I sat alone at a table in the corner, holding a tray of food that looked more like military rations. The oatmeal was cold and tasteless, but my churning stomach could barely process anything after the previous night's experience. "So you're the new girl who's going to die today," said a female voice behind me. I turned and found the coldest green eyes I had ever seen. The girl was about my age, but she wore scars on her arms like war trophies. Platinum blonde hair cut into a perfect bob, an upright posture that screamed military discipline, and a smile that promised pain. "Valentina Cortez," she introduced herself, sitting down in front of me without being invited. 3rd year, already partially bonded with a fire dragon. "And you are?" "Isadora Mendes." "Ah, yes, the daughter of the deserter." The words hit my chest like a punch. "How did you—" "Everyone here knows your father's story, dear." "Valentina." Bit off a piece of bread as if it were raw meat. "Eduardo Mendes, the prodigy cadet who managed to bond with an adult dragon in record time, until the day he decided to run away with her and was hunted down like an animal." The cafeteria around us seemed to have grown quieter, as if the other conversations had died down to make way for ours. I felt dozens of eyes glued to me, analyzing my every reaction. "That's a lie," I managed to whisper, but my voice sounded weak even to me. "Really?" Valentina tilted her head, feigning innocent curiosity. "Then why does Commander Vargas have a photo of you and your father on his desk? Why does he stare at you like he's seeing a ghost?" Before I could answer, the sound of military boots echoed through the cafeteria. Commander Vargas entered with steady steps, his impeccable black uniform contrasting with the scars that mapped his face. The silence became absolute. "First-year cadets," his voice cut through, the air like a knife. "Proceed to the primary assessment chambers. Testing begins in 10 minutes. My blood ran cold. Valentina smiled, revealing perfect teeth. "Good luck, daughter of a deserter. You'll need it." The primary assessment chambers were located in the 2nd basement of the academy, accessible only by a spiral staircase that seemed to descend straight to the center of the earth. The air grew thicker with each step, heavy with a smell I couldn't identify, something between rusty metal and dead flowers. There were 6 of us newbies, in total. Besides me, there were 2 boys who looked like they had stepped out of a protein supplement commercial, an Asian girl who didn't talk to anyone, a skinny boy who couldn't stop shaking, and a red-haired girl who chewed gum as if her life depended on it. "The first assessment," explained Commander Vargas as we walked through the torch-lit corridors, "consists of controlled proximity. You will come into direct contact with young dragons, under supervision. The goal is to measure your tolerance to the draconic presence and detect any natural affinities. We stopped in front of a reinforced metal door that looked capable of withstanding a nuclear explosion. Vargas typed a code into an electronic panel and the door opened with a hydraulic hiss. Some of you may experience nausea, dizziness, or nosebleeds, he continued, as if describing the side effects of a medication. This is normal. What is not normal is fainting, having seizures, or hearing voices. If this happens, leave the chamber immediately. Hearing voices. My stomach clenched at the memory of my connection with Tempest of the Plateau. The chamber was circular, with a vaulted ceiling that disappeared into the shadows. In the center, chained to a stone platform by chains that seemed to be made of a special metal, was a young dragon. It was nothing like I had imagined. The creature was about the size of a horse, but its presence seemed to fill the entire space. Emerald green scales covered a slender but muscular body, and its wings, even when folded, suggested an impressive wingspan. The eyes were what impressed me the most. Intelligent, ancient, laden with a wisdom that transcended its apparent age. "This is North Wind," said Vargas, a male dragon of approximately 50 years of age. Still young by draconic standards, but he has already developed his basic empathic abilities. One of the muscular boys who had introduced himself, as Diego during the walk stepped forward. "I'll go first, sir." Vargas nodded, and Diego approached the platform with the confidence of someone who had never doubted himself. The dragon raised its head, studying the cadet with interest. For a moment, it seemed that everything would go well. Then North Wind opened its jaws slightly and emitted a low sound. Not exactly a roar, but something like an amplified purr. Diego stopped walking, his face drained of color. I can't," he stammered, bringing his hands to his head. "There's something in my mind, trying to get in." "Low empathic resistance," Vargas noted in his notebook. "Next." Diego staggered out of the chamber, clearly shaken. The Asian girl who called herself Keiko was next. She managed to get closer, even lightly touching one of the dragon's scales. But after a few minutes, she started bleeding from her nose and had to leave. One by one, my colleagues were tested and failed in different ways. The skinny boy fainted before he even got close to the platform. The red-haired girl started crying compulsively and couldn't stop. Finally, only I remained. "Isadora Mendes," Vargas called. But there was something different in his voice. Expectation, perhaps, or fear. I approached Northwind with legs that felt like jelly. The dragon watched me approach, and as our eyes met, I felt that familiar sensation, as if my mind were a door opening to let someone in. But this time, it didn't hurt. "Little daughter." The dragon's voice echoed softly in my head. "You carry the scent of the ancient lineage. Your blood sings with the same song as your father's." Without realizing it, I had come so close that I could touch the creature's snout. Northwind lowered his head, allowing me to stroke the scales near his eyes. They were warm and smooth, pulsing, with an energy I could feel through my fingertips. Why did my father have to die? I asked mentally, not even sure the question made sense. Because he discovered the truth about this place. The truth they would kill to keep hidden. Enough. Vargas's voice cut the connection like a knife. When I turned to look at him, I saw that his hands were shaking slightly. "Isadora, you passed the first test." Passed? I didn't even know I was being tested. "Sir," I dared to ask, "what happened to the others?" "The others failed. You two will proceed to the second phase tomorrow." "Two?" Vargas pointed behind me. I turned and saw Valentina Cortez leaning against the chamber wall, her arms crossed and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, daughter of the deserter. Looks like we're going to be training partners." How had she gotten there without me noticing? That night, in the dormitory, the other cadets avoided me as if I were contagious. Whispers followed me through the hallways, and I caught fragments of conversations, just like his father. Abnormal connection? He'll end up just like him. I was lying on my bed, pretending to be asleep, when I heard silent footsteps approaching. I opened my eyes and saw Valentina standing next to my bunk, watching me with those icy green eyes. "You shouldn't have been able to connect with North Wind," she whispered, low enough not to wake the others. "Young dragons are territorial with strangers. Unless what? Unless you're not a stranger to them." She leaned closer, and I could see something like admiration mixed with envy in her expression. "Tell me about the stone you wear around your neck." My hand flew instinctively to the necklace hidden beneath my nightgown. "What stone? Please. I can feel its energy from here. It's a fragment of an egg, isn't it? A dragon egg." My heart raced in my chest. How could she know? "Where did you get it, Isadora?" Egg fragments are extremely rare. Most were destroyed decades ago when the Brazilian government decided that dragons were a threat to national security. I don't know what you're talking about." Valentina laughed softly, but it wasn't a funny sound. "You really don't know anything, do you? Your father didn't die in an accident. He was executed by Commander Vargas himself after trying to escape with a pregnant dragoness." She paused, letting the words sink in. "The dragoness died too. But before she did, she managed to lay an egg. The air rushed out of my lungs. That fragment on your neck is all that's left of the brood that should have been your dragon sister or brother. And that's why you can connect with them so easily. You're half dragon, Isadora. Literally. The world around me began to spin. Half dragon? Was that possible?" "Impossible," I muttered, more to myself than to her. "Is that so? Then explain why you can hear their thoughts. Explain why Tempest of the Plateau flew over the academy the night you arrived, something that hadn't happened in 20 years. Explain why Commander Vargas keeps looking at you like you're a bomb about to explode." Before I could answer, a low roar echoed through the academy walls. It wasn't a sound of pain or anger, but something deeper. Sadder. "What was that?" Valentina straightened up, all arrogance disappearing from her face. "The older dragons. Something's wrong." She ran to the window and looked out. "Shit! Isadora, come look at this." I staggered to my feet and joined her at the window. Outside, red lights flashed across the academy complex. An emergency siren began to wail, piercing and urgent. "Containment alert," Valentina whispered, her face pressed against the glass. "Something's come out of the deep caves." That's when I saw the shadow, huge, moving between the academy buildings with a grace that defied its size. A dragon larger than anything I had ever imagined, with scales that glowed like liquid gold even in the darkness. "Plateau Storm. Little one." Her voice echoed in my mind across the distance, laden with urgency. "They are killing my people one by one, with poison disguised as medicine. You must come to the deep chambers. There are truths you must know before it is too late." "Isadora!" Valentina shook me by the shoulders. "Your eyes, they're glowing." I looked at my reflection in the window and saw that she was right. My honey-colored eyes had taken on an unnatural golden glow, pulsing in time with the stone in my chest. The roar echoed again, louder now, and was joined by others. The dragons of the entire academy were responding to Tempest's call. And I, somehow impossibly, understood every nuance of that ancient song. They were asking for help, and I was the only one who could hear them. "Put on your uniform," said Valentina, already running to her own locker. "If we're going to find out what's going on, we need to get to the caves before the guards wake up." "Let's go?" She looked at me with an expression that was a mixture of determination and madness. "You're not the only one here with secrets, daughter of a deserter. My family also has scores to settle with this academy." She pulled up the sleeve of her nightgown, revealing a claw-shaped scar that ran from her wrist to her elbow. "They killed my older brother last year. They said it was a training accident. 2 minutes later, we were running through the dark corridors of the academy, following the echo of roars calling us into the depths of the mountain. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to discover truths that would change everything I thought I knew about dragons, about my father, and about myself. And some truths, once discovered, can never be forgotten. The academy corridors at night were a maze of shadows and distorted echoes. Valentina guided me through passages I didn't even know existed, her silent footsteps contrasting with my heart, which was beating so hard that I was sure it would wake up the entire academy. "This way," she whispered, opening a door disguised behind a painting of the academy's founder. "This passage leads directly to the middle levels of the caves. How do you know about this?" "My brother showed me before he died." Her voice carried a bitterness that cut deeper than any blade. "Rodrigo discovered things he shouldn't have, just like his father." We descended a spiral staircase, so narrow that our backs brushed against the stone walls. The air grew thicker with each step, laden with that strange smell I had noticed during the tests. Rusty metal and something too sweet, almost sickening. "Valentina," I murmured as we walked. "What did you mean when you talked about poison disguised as medicine?" She stopped so abruptly that we almost collided. "Haven't you noticed that the older dragons are different? Slower, more docile than they should be?" Her green eyes glowed in the dim light. "Elder dragons shouldn't allow humans to keep them captive. They should be burning this academy to the ground." She was right. During the tests, North Wind had seemed almost tame, too submissive for a creature that was supposed to be an apex predator. What are they doing to them? That's what we're going to find out. We came to a fork in the tunnels. To the left, I could hear the distant echo of low roars, dragon conversations that my mind could partially translate. To the right, there was absolute silence that made my skin crawl. Valentina chose the right. "Wait," I grabbed her arm. "The dragons are on the other side." "I know, but first we need to see this." We continued down the silent tunnel until we reached a metal door with a small reinforced glass window. Valentina motioned for me to peek through it, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It was a laboratory. Surgical metal tables occupied the center of the room, equipped with straps and instruments that seemed more at home in a medieval torture chamber than a medical center. On the walls were dozens of jars containing liquids of different colors, some transparent, others with hues ranging from emerald green to blood red. But what made me step back from the window with my stomach churning were the things floating in some of the larger jars. Dragon scales, fangs, and in a jar in the darkest corner, something that looked suspiciously like a still-beating heart. "My God," I whispered, covering my mouth to keep from vomiting. "Now you understand," Valentina said, with a coldness that didn't suit her 18 years. "They're not just domesticating the dragons, they're dissecting them, studying them, trying to replicate their abilities." A familiar voice echoed through the hallway behind us, making us freeze. "The samples from specimen G7 have shown promising results. Cell regeneration has accelerated by 300% after the serum was applied." It was Commander Vargas. Valentina pulled me into a dark alcove between the rocks as two figures approached. Besides Vargas, there was a man I didn't recognize. Short, bald, wearing a white lab coat stained with something I preferred not to identify. "Excellent, Dr. Henrique," Vargas replied, stopping right in front of the lab door. "What about the side effects on the live specimens?" "Some signs of lethargy and loss of aggression, as expected, but nothing that compromises our main objectives." The man in the lab coat took a tablet out of his pocket and showed something to Vargas. "The Chimera project is progressing as planned." Chimera project? My heart raced. Great. And the daughter? Daughter? Whose daughter were they talking about? "Ah, yes, little Isadora." Dr. Henrique laughed, a sound that made me think of bones breaking. "Her empathic readings are extraordinary, almost identical to her father's." "Eduardo was always special," Vargas murmured, and there was something like regret in his voice. "It's a shame he chose the wrong side." "Well, now we have a second chance. If we can channel her abilities correctly." "No." Vargas' voice cut through the air like a whip. "She's not a guinea pig, Henrique. She's a tool. And tools need to be shaped, not broken." "As you wish, Commander. But our superiors in Brasilia are getting impatient. They want results from the Draconic Super Soldier program by the end of the year." Draconic Super Soldiers. The words echoed in my mind like a funeral bell. They wanted to create soldiers with dragon abilities, and I was a crucial part of that plan. The two men entered the lab, and their voices became too muffled for us to understand. Valentina motioned for us to move, but when I tried to leave the alcove, my legs wouldn't obey. I was paralyzed by terror and the realization of what was really happening. "Isadora," Valentina whispered urgently. "We have to go. Now." But before we could move, a new voice echoed in my mind. Not one, but multiple voices speaking in unison. "Daughter of ancient blood, come to us. Time is running out." The stone in my chest began to pulse with a golden light that shone through the fabric of my nightgown. It was impossible to hide. "Shit," Valentina muttered, seeing the glow. "They'll see that," but it was too late. The light had already caught the attention of the men in the lab. Through the window, I saw Dr. Henrique pointing in our direction. "Run!" said a voice behind us. We turned and found Marcus Teodoro, the cruel cadet who had greeted me on my first day. But now there was no malice in his eyes, only fear. "Marcus?" Valentina frowned. "What are you doing here?" "The same thing you are, looking for answers." He pointed down the hallway we had come from. "There are a dozen guards coming down that way. If we don't get out now, we'll be the next test subjects." We didn't need any more encouragement. The three of us ran through the tunnels like rats in a maze, the sound of military boots echoing behind us. Marcus led us through passages that seemed even older than the others, with walls covered in cave paintings depicting humans and dragons living side by side. "Here," he said, pushing a seemingly solid rock that turned out to be a disguised door. "Secret entrance to the deep chambers." "How do you know about this?" I asked, panting. "Because I'm not really a cadet," he replied, his voice completely changed. Older, more tired. "I'm an investigator for the Ministry of Defense. I came here 3 years ago investigating reports of illegal experiments on dragons." Valentina stared at him in disbelief. 3 years? And you haven't found anything?" "I've found a lot. I just haven't been able to find enough evidence to bring down the operation." He pushed us through the opening. Until now. On the other side of the secret door, we found a completely different world. The deep chambers were vast as cathedrals, with ceilings that disappeared into the darkness. Natural crystals on the walls emitted a soft blue light, creating an almost magical atmosphere. And everywhere, dragons. Not chained or sedated dragons, but free and majestic creatures in their natural environment. Some slept curled up on stone platforms. Others conversed in groups, their voices creating complex harmonies that echoed through the caves. And in the center of it all, rising like a golden mountain, stood Tempest of the Plateau. Finally, his voice filled my mind like a symphonic orchestra. "There is so much we need to talk about, little daughter." I approached him in a trance, vaguely aware that Valentina and Marcus were following me. The other dragons watched us approach, but there was no hostility in their eyes, only an ancient, melancholy curiosity. "These are the true chambers," Storm explained when I got close, enough to touch his golden scales. "The last refuge of our kind. Everything above us is a sham, a theater to deceive those who do not understand our true nature." "How many of you are there?" I asked aloud, so my companions could hear as well. "Few, very few." Sadness colored her mental reply. "There were hundreds of us when your father arrived here. Now there are less than 30. What happened?" Tempest lowered her enormous head until her golden eyes were level with mine. "They are systematically killing us, little one by one, under the guise of medical research. They extract our blood, our organs, our very essence to create artificial soldiers. And when there is nothing useful left in our bodies, they simply discard us." A smaller dragon with cobalt blue scales approached us. When she spoke, her mental voice was clearly female. "I am Azure of the Deep. I was your father's mate, Isadora. He died trying to save us. The world seemed to crumble around me. My father had died trying to save the dragons, and I was being trained to continue the work that had killed him. Azure, I whispered, reaching out a trembling hand to touch her scales. You're my draconic mother, yes. The egg you carry in your chest contains the essence of the child we lost. Your brother who was never born. The tears came without warning, hot and salty. I had a dragon family, I had had a brother, and both had been destroyed by the same institution that now wanted to use me as a weapon. Isadora! Marcus's voice brought me back to reality. We need to get out of here. They'll find the secret entrance soon. But Tempest shook her head, her scales tinkling like wind chimes. No. Now that she's here, we can finally act. Isadora, you are the key that can free my people, but the price will be high. What price? You will have to choose between your humanity and your draconic heritage. To save us, you will need to fully accept who you are. And once you make that choice, there is no turning back. Before I could respond, the sound of explosions echoed through the caves. Rocks began to fall from the ceiling, and the air filled with dust and debris. They've found the entrance. Azure roared, his scales glowing with a battle light. Time is running out. Tempest rose in all her majesty, her wings spreading like golden curtains. Little daughter, if you want to save your people, both of your peoples, you must make a choice now. Do you accept complete bond with me? Do you accept becoming what your father could never be? The sound of military boots echoed through the tunnels, rapidly approaching. Valentina screamed my name. Marcus drew a weapon I didn't know he had, and I, in the center of it all, had to decide the fate of two species. The stone in my chest pulsed like a second heart, hot as lava. I could feel Tempest's power calling me, promising enough strength to change everything. But I could also feel the danger. The transformation would be irreversible. Isadora! Valentina shook me by the shoulders. Decide. I looked into the golden eyes of Tempest of the Plateau, then into the desperate eyes of my human companions, and finally into the sad eyes of Azure of the Depths, my dragon mother who had lost everything. The choice I made at that moment would define not only my destiny, but the future of an entire species on the brink of extinction. And I knew, deep in my heart, that there was no choice. There never had been. I accept, I whispered, reaching out to touch Storm. The moment our skin touched, the world exploded in golden light and pain beyond anything I had ever experienced. I felt my bones expand, my skin transform, my mind merge with something ancient and powerful. The last thing I heard before losing consciousness was the triumphant roar of all the dragons in the deep chambers, echoing through the mountain like the war cry of a species that refused to die. The pain was indescribable. I woke up in a special containment cell with reinforced metal walls and bars that pulsed with a strange energy that made my skin burn every time I got close. My entire body throbbed as if every cell had been taken apart and reassembled incorrectly. When I tried to stand up, I realized that something was fundamentally different. My hands were no longer completely human. Golden scales sprouted from the skin around my wrists, rising up my forearms like living tattoos. My fingers ended in small but sharp claws, and when I flexed my muscles, I felt a strength I had never possessed before. But the most disturbing thing was my eyes. I could see in the dark with crystal clarity, and colors I didn't even know existed danced at the edges of my vision. You're finally awake. Dr. Henrique's voice made me turn my head so quickly that I heard my vertebrae crack. He was on the other side of the bars, watching me with the sick fascination of a child dissecting an insect. Partial transformation, he muttered, scribbling on a clipboard. Emerging draconic physical characteristics, but human personality apparently intact. Fascinating. Where are the others? My voice came out hoarse, deeper than before. Your little friends? Investigator Marcus is being interrogated by Commander Vargas at this very moment. As for Valentina, he smiled, revealing yellow teeth. Well, she volunteered to be our next test subject. Very altruistic of her. My blood ran cold. You can't. I can do whatever I want, my dear hybrid. Dr. Henrique approached the bars, careful not to touch them. You no longer have any human rights. Officially, Isadora Mendes died during a training accident this morning. What's left is scientific property of the Brazilian government. The rage I felt in that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just human, it was primal, draconic, burning through my veins like molten lava. When I screamed, the sound that came out was a roar that made the metal bars vibrate. Interesting, Dr. Henrique noted, seemingly immune to the terror he must have been feeling. Manifestation of draconic vocalization under emotional stress. The vocal cords have undergone significant adaptations. I rushed toward the bars, determined to break the neck of that monster in the white coat, but the moment I touched the metal, an electric shock threw me back against the opposite wall. The energy that coursed through my body was like being struck by lightning, leaving me convulsing on the floor for several seconds. Special containment bars, the doctor explained with satisfaction, designed specifically to contain draconic anomalies. The more force you use against them, the stronger the shock. I lay on the cold floor, trembling, as tears of frustration streamed down my face. The transformation had given me power, but what good was it if I was trapped like a lab animal? Now, Dr. Henrique pulled up a chair and sat down comfortably. Let's talk about your future, or rather how you're going to help us replicate your abilities in conventional soldiers. Never. Oh, my dear, you don't understand yet. He took a tablet out of his pocket and showed me a screen. Your dragon friends from the deep chambers are being relocated to our research facility in Brasilia as we speak, including Azure of the Depths and Tempest of the Plateau. The image showed the dragons being loaded unconscious into military trucks, with special chains and sedation devices that seemed to torture more than restrain. And your human friends. Another image appeared on the screen. Marcus was tied to a chair, his face swollen and bleeding. Valentina was on a surgical table, unconscious, with tubes and needles connected to her arms. Bastards, I muttered, but my voice sounded broken. Cooperate with us, and they can have quick and painless deaths. Refuse, and I will personally make sure they suffer for days before finally expiring. There was no way out. They had won. The cell door opened with a hydraulic hiss, and Commander Vargas entered, his uniform stained with blood that I preferred to believe wasn't Marcus's. His scars looked deeper in the artificial light of the cell, especially the large burn that disfigured half his face. Isadora, he said, and there was something like sadness in his voice. You did exactly what I expected you to do. Expected? Vargas knelt in front of me, ignoring the claws I instinctively extended toward him. You think it was a coincidence that I let you discover the laboratory? Do you think it was chance that Marcus found the secret entrance to the deep chambers? He shook his head. I needed you to form the bond with Tempest of the Plateau. It was the only way to complete the transformation. The realization hit me like a punch in the stomach. You planned all of this. From the moment you arrived here. Vargas stood up, adjusting his uniform. Your father was a failed test. He developed feelings for the dragons and tried to protect them. But you have the potential to be our perfect weapon. With your draconic connection and properly conditioned human loyalty. I'll never work for you. You will. He motioned to Dr. Henrique, who pulled a syringe filled with a blue-green liquid from his pocket. This is a little gift we developed using blood from Tempest of the Plateau. It will help adjust your priorities. My heart raced. What is this? Chemical mind control, Dr. Henrique explained, testing the syringe. Specifically, formulated to work on draconic hybrids. After the injection, you will still be yourself, but your motivations will be aligned with our goals. It was the end. I had failed everyone. The dragons, my friends, my father's memory. In a few hours, I would be a controlled puppet doing the dirty work for the same monsters who had destroyed my family. Dr. Henrique approached me with the syringe, and I closed my eyes, waiting to feel the needle pierce my skin. Instead, I heard, the sound of metal being torn apart. I opened my eyes and saw Valentina ripping the bars from the cell with superhuman strength. Her veins glowed with an electric blue light, and her eyes had taken on a silvery hue I had never seen in humans. "Sorry I took so long," she said, smiling through cracked and bloody lips. "I had to make a few adjustments." Dr. Henrique dropped the syringe and rushed toward the alarm button, but Valentina was faster. She grabbed him by the neck and threw him against the wall with such force that I heard bones breaking. "Valentina," I whispered. "What did they do to you?" "The same thing they did to you," she replied, helping me to my feet. "Except they used electric dragon blood instead of golden dragon blood." Vargas was backing toward the door, his hand on the radio. "Guards! Emergency! Containment, 2 hybrids loose." But before he could complete the call, a third figure appeared in the doorway. Marcus was standing, despite his obvious injuries, holding a weapon I didn't recognize. "This is a draconic containment weapon," he explained, pointing at Vargas. "Designed to incapacitate creatures with dragon DNA. Are you sure you want to test if it works on you too, Commander?" For a moment, I thought we had won. That against all odds, we had found a way to escape. Then Vargas smiled. "You really think I wouldn't plan for that possibility?" He pressed something on his wrist, and sirens began to wail throughout the academy. "Extinction protocol activated. In 30 minutes, the entire complex will be purged with liquid fire, including the deep chambers where your dragon friends are being held." My blood ran cold. "You're going to kill them all?" "If we can't control the hybrids, then it's better to eliminate all evidence." Vargas began to back down the hallway. "You have a simple choice. Surrender now, and maybe I'll stop the protocol. Or watch as all the creatures you wanted to save burn to death." Marcus pulled the trigger, but Vargas had already disappeared behind an armored door. "Shit," Marcus muttered, examining his gun. "I only had 1 round." Valentina punched the wall, leaving a fist mark on the stone. 30 minutes to save the dragons and get off this mountain before it turns into a giant oven." Her silver eyes flashed with determination. "Any brilliant ideas?" I closed my eyes and searched for any connection I might have left with Tempest of the Plateau or Azure. For a moment, I felt only silence. Then, faint as a whisper, I heard the familiar voice. "Little daughter, we're still here, but not for long." "Storm," I shouted mentally. "Where are you?" "Special containment chambers. 5 levels below. But the doors they're sealed with dragon blood. Only a hybrid can open them." The connection broke, leaving me with the terrible realization that we were the dragon's only hope. 3 modified teenagers against an entire military facility, with less than half an hour to do the impossible. "I found them," I told Marcus and Valentina. 5 levels below, in special containment chambers." "And the plan to get there?" Marcus asked. I looked at my golden clawed hands, then at Valentina's silver eyes, and finally at Marcus's iron determination. "We'll fight our way down," I replied, feeling a new strength rising within me. It wasn't just the draconic strength of the transformation, it was something deeper. The strength that comes from knowing exactly what you're fighting for. "What if we don't make it?" asked Valentina. I smiled, and for the first time since I had woken up in the cell, I felt true hope. "Then let's at least make sure they never do this to anyone else." We ran through the halls of the academy as the sirens screamed our doom. But we weren't the scared children who had arrived here. We were something else now, hybrids with the power of dragons and human determination. And we were going to save our family, even if it cost us our lives. 23 minutes. That was the time left on the red digital timer flashing on every wall as we ran through the academy corridors. The extinction protocol had turned the place into a countdown to the apocalypse, and every second that passed reminded us of how many lives depended on our success. "This way!" Marcus shouted, opening an emergency door that led to the service stairs. 5 floors to the special containment chambers." We took the stairs 3 at a time, Valentina using her hybrid strength to break down locked doors, as if they were made of paper. My transformation had given me supernatural agility. I could jump entire stairwells with ease, and my night vision allowed me to navigate the growing darkness as we descended. "Isadora," Valentina's voice echoed as we ran. "Can you sense the dragons?" I closed my eyes for a moment and searched for the mental connection. The presence of Tempest of the Plateau was weaker now, but it was still there. "Little daughter, hurry. They're injecting something into us. It's getting harder to resist." "They're sedating the dragons," I shouted to my companions. "If we don't get there soon, it may be too late. 17 minutes. We reached the 5th basement level and found a hallway unlike anything we had seen in the academy. The walls were made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light, and the air was thick with a chemical smell that made my eyes sting. Numbered doors lined the entire length of the hallway, each sealed with complex electronic devices. "Draconian containment chambers." Marcus read a sign on the wall. "Access restricted to authorized personnel with alpha clearance." "Well, I feel very authorized," Valentina muttered, approaching the first door. The electronic panel flashed red when she tried to open it, but when I placed my hybrid hand on the sensor, it beeped green and the door opened with a hiss. "Dragon blood," I explained. "The locks recognize our transformation." The first chamber was empty, but signs of a struggle were evident. Claw marks on the walls, dark stains on the floor that we preferred not to identify. The second and third chambers were also empty, increasing our desperation. It was in the 4th chamber that we found the first dragon. It was Northwind, the young dragon from my first tests. He lay unconscious on a surgical table with tubes connected to different parts of his body, draining a golden liquid that I recognized as dragon blood. His body, once powerful and graceful, looked fragile and diminished. "My God," Valentina whispered, rushing to disconnect the tubes. "What have they done to him?" "Blood. They drain our blood to create more hybrids." Northwind's mental voice was an agonizing whisper. "But no. Like you. They force transformations. Many humans die. Others go mad." "Where are the others?" I asked, stroking his head. "Carefully. Storm, Azure, Central Chamber, end of the corridor. But there are guards, many guards. 11 minutes. We left Northwind recovering in the open chamber and ran to the end of the corridor. Marcus was right. There were guards. A dozen of them, all armed with the same draconic restraint weapons he had used on Vargas. "Plan?" asked Valentina, her veins glowing with blue electrical energy. "I'll distract them," said Marcus, checking his weapon. "You two go into the central chamber and free the dragons." "Marcus, you'll die," I protested. He smiled, and there was a strange peace in his bruised eyes. "Maybe, but some sacrifices are worth making." He turned to face the guards. "Besides, I'm the only one here who's still completely human. If someone's going to die today, I'd rather it be someone who can be replaced." Before we could protest, Marcus ran toward the guards, shouting and firing. The soldiers turned on him, concentrating their fire, while Valentina and I circled around them in the shadows. The central chamber was 3 times larger than the others, and what we saw inside made my heart break. Plateau Storm hung in the center of the room by special chains that seemed to drain his life energy. His golden scales had lost their luster, and his majestic eyes were closed. Azure of the Depths lay on a table nearby, unconscious, with more drainage tubes connected to his body. But the worst was what was on the walls. Dozens of jars containing dragon organs, hearts still beating, eyes that moved to follow us. And, in the center of it all, a giant tank filled with a reddish gold liquid that I knew was a mixture of the blood of all the dragons that had been murdered. "Welcome to my sanctuary," said a familiar voice behind us. We turned and saw Commander Vargas entering the chamber, but he was different. Half of his face still bore the old scars, but the other half had been replaced by metallic scales that glinted in the light. One of his arms was clearly mechanical, ending in metal claws, and his eyes had taken on an artificial golden glow. "A hybrid cyborg," Valentina whispered in horror. "The next stage of evolution," Vargas confirmed, flexing his mechanical claws. When I realized that natural transformation was too unpredictable, I decided to improve the process. Minutes. You're just in time for the grand finale, he continued, approaching a control panel. In a few minutes, the purification system will be activated. But before that, he pressed a button and the machines connected to the dragons began to work faster. I'm going to drain all the remaining life essence from our friends here. Tempest of the Plateau opened her eyes with difficulty, and her mental voice reached me like a distant echo. Isadora, there is a way, but you must be willing to sacrifice yourself. No, I replied aloud. We've already lost too many people. Not death, little one. Complete transformation. Fully accepting your draconic nature. But you will never be human again. Vargas laughed when he heard our conversation. Ah, yes, complete transformation. I tried that once. He pointed to his scars. It almost killed me, but you have the right blood to survive. Valentina was trying to break the chains that bound Tempest, but they were made of the same special metal as the prison bars, resistant to hybrid strength. Isadora, she shouted, do something. I can't get him loose. 4 minutes. I looked at Tempest of the Plateau, then at Azure, then at the horrible vials on the walls. I thought of my father, who had died trying to save these majestic creatures. I thought of all the dragons that had been tortured and killed to satisfy human thirst for power. And I made my decision. I placed both hands on Plateau Storm and opened my mind completely to his. I accept. I thought with all the strength I could muster. Teach me how to save them. What followed was an explosion of pain and power that made my first transformation feel like a headache. I felt my bones expanding, my skin being replaced by golden scales, my mind expanding to accommodate centuries of draconic memories. When the transformation was complete, I was no longer Isadora Mendes. I was something new. Something that had never existed before. A perfect hybrid of human and dragon, with the compassion of one and the power of the other. Vargas recoiled, genuine fear in his cybernetic eyes. Impossible, he muttered. The complete transformation should have killed you. I extended my new claws and felt the power flow through them. With one gesture, I broke all the chains that bound the dragons. With another, I destroyed the draining machines. The difference between us, I said to Vargas, my voice now carrying draconic harmonies, is that you have always seen dragons as tools. I see them as family. 2 minutes. Plainstorm rose, quickly regaining strength now that she was free. Little daughter? No. Big sister now. We must leave. The fire is coming. Valentina, I shouted. Help Marcus. I'll take care of Vargas. She ran out of the chamber as I faced the cyborg commander. He was strong and fast, but his mechanical modifications were heavy and predictable. My new draconic abilities allowed me to move like the wind and strike like fire. Within 30 seconds, he was on the ground, his mechanical modifications destroyed. Why? He gasped, blood pouring from his mouth. Why protect creatures that could replace us? Because, I replied, kneeling beside him, family isn't about power. It's about love. 1 minute. I rushed out of the chamber and found Valentina carrying Marcus, unconscious but alive. Tempest and Azure were waiting, along with 3 other dragons who had survived the experiments. The exit from the caves! Azure roared, pointing to a tunnel I hadn't noticed before. It leads straight to the surface. We ran through the tunnels as the academy exploded behind us. The purification system had been activated, incinerating decades of evil research and evidence of crimes against an entire species. When we finally reached the surface, the sun was rising over the mountains of Santa Catarina. The academy had been reduced to a smoking crater, but we had survived. 6 months later, I am writing this from the new sanctuary we built in the most remote mountains of the range, far from human curiosity. It is a place where dragons can live freely, where hybrids like Valentina and me can learn to control our powers, and where the true history can be preserved. Marcus has made a full recovery and now works with us, documenting the true history of Brazilian dragons. Valentina has developed the ability to generate protective electric fields around the sanctuary, keeping it hidden from government satellites and drones. And me? I've learned that some choices change you forever, but that doesn't mean they were wrong choices. I am no longer completely human, but I am not completely dragon either. I am something new, a bridge between two worlds that must learn to coexist. Tempest of the Highlands and Azure of the Depths are slowly recovering, and Azure is pregnant again. In a few months, there will be a new dragon cub in the world, the firstborn in freedom in over 20 years. Sometimes at night, I can still hear the whispers of the dragons who died in the Academy's laboratories. They remind me that freedom comes at a price, and that some battles never truly end. But they also remind me of something more important, that it's worth fighting for those we love, even when it costs us everything we thought we were. My name was Isadora Mendes. Now I am something that does not yet have a name. Guardian of dragons, protector of hybrids, bridge between worlds. And this is only the first story I have to tell. Hey, everyone on the Supernatural Teens channel, we've reached the end of this intense journey. I hope you felt every emotion, every tension, every moment of hope and despair, along with Isadora. This story of transformation, sacrifice, and family found is one of the most intense I've ever told. Don't forget to like the video if the story moved you and subscribe to the channel for more supernatural stories that will make you question the boundaries between humanity and the extraordinary. And as promised, leave a rating from 0 to 10 for the Academy of Lost Dragons in the comments and tell me what part you liked best. Was it Isadora's transformation? The revelation about her father? The secret laboratory? The final fight? I want to know everything.